Hello, Green Thumbs. It's Austin here, and I have a special message before the episode regarding our guest this week. Our guest this week is the legendary Tom Carruth, who lives in Altadena in Southern California. And unfortunately, he just lost his home in the fire last week. And Tom Carruth is a cherished member of our horticultural community. And what's cool to see is that there's support happening. A GoFundMe fundraiser for Tom is being organized by Beverly Rose Hopper of Jackson, California, along with friends in the Rose community and beyond. Now, you're going to learn in this episode that Tom has given so much beauty. So if you're interested in supporting Tom in his time of need, we've added the link to that fundraiser in the episode description. Our hearts go out to everyone who is affected by the fire devastation, and I personally encourage you to support if you can. But let's go ahead and move forward with our episode now and learn all that we can from Tom. Here we go. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of Green Acres and our guests. These general gardening tips and suggestions may work for you, as well as those from alternative sources. When using any garden products or tools, read and follow all label directions. And learn how to make your yard summer strong at bewatersmart.info.
The Green Acres Garden Podcast is the podcast dedicated to helping gardeners hone their growing skills while we celebrate our love of plants. So whether you're new to growing or a seasoned gardener, you're sure to learn something new. Join the fun as we have conversations with world-class growers, passionate green thumbs, and professional garden experts from Green Acres Nursery and Supply. Listen every week. We'll answer questions you didn't know you had. And away we grow. Let's do it, ladies and gentlemen. We have a great episode for you this week. My name's Kevin Jordan. I love plants, and this is the Green Acres Garden Podcast. You're at the right place if you love plants. Back in studio for a great episode. We had Zoomed with, I would say, an international rose superstar. It was amazing. This is an episode for me personally that I've been looking forward to for several months. Once we knew we got this person locked in, I actually got to meet them in person. Who is that? None other than Tom Carruth. Like I said, he is a rose superstar. Over 40 years as a rose hybridizer. In that time, bringing over 100 roses to the market, all new. And then in those over 100 roses, 11 of which were all-American rose selection winners. I'm talking, this is the creme de la creme, Austin.
What?
This is top tier.
Creme? Yeah, Tom is so cool. What an awesome guy. He's achieved so much. It's not every day we have somebody on the show who's created 100 different roses.
Absolutely. Oftentimes, some of our episodes revolve around like the topic of just the plants. But I think this week's episode, there is a great balance where we get to discuss roses, learn about them in depth from somebody who has just a rich history of working with them. I mean, he's loved plants, you'll learn, since he was 5 years old. This is someone, I mean, it's in his blood, it's in his veins, it's in his soul, his spirit. And we'll get into it with him a little bit, but I was so stoked to have him on. I actually have a tiny little patch of roses at my house, Austin,
right,
just 9, and most of which I went out there today, and it's actually end of December as we record this.
How many did
and
Tom?
There's still some of them which are still blooming. I brought some in.
Oh,
here, don't get any ideas, buddy. These have actually been rained on a little bit, but there's a Strike It Rich blossom. They're still blooming. I'm going to have to cut them back here pretty soon, but that's actually one of his.
That smells good.
I have his Ebb Tide, the Neil Diamond, and a few others as well. And I've got to get my hands on that Julia Child. But yeah.
They're in the stores now. So bare root roses, at least at Green Acres, are available. And we have tons of varieties available. And they're all in the bare root pulp pots, which makes it easy to put in your yard, easy to plant. And a lot of Tom's roses are now available.
You know, it'd be nice. I wish they should have a special label just for on the TC.
Put a little TC on there.
Little TC. But honestly, he's an incredible person. Like I said, we got to meet him in person, and he was so warm and thoughtful. He made a lot of time for us, and it was great because when I got to meet him, Austin, he was at an event or even kind of like a kickback, but all the people there were like rose enthusiasts, rosarians, master rosarians. And he was honestly like a proper superstar there, but not like not rude or anything like that, as he like some celebrities.
This was like a couple months ago, right?
But so cool, and everybody just was kind of knew what he was up to. They've seen his body of work, and they were giving him the proper love and respect, and everybody just had so much warmth for him. So this is a really cool episode to actually have somebody who's had such a long history with something. And so We're going to get to share it with everybody today.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and dive into that. This is our interview with Mr. Tom Carruth. Here we go.
So I'm here with Tom Carruth, speaking over Zoom. Tom, how's it going?
I'm good, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing great. First of all, thank you so much for making time for us. I've heard so many wonderful things about you. I was stoked that I got to meet you a month or so ago, and so I just really appreciate getting a chance to have you on. So thank you so much.
Well, don't believe all of that.
So first, Tom, let's get into it. Why do you love roses so much?
I was a strange child. I pronounced my love of flowers when I was 5 years old, and I had my first rose garden when I was 11. So I actually sold burpee seed all that summer to have enough money to buy some roses. And I bought from a mail order firm that was, now I know now, was a very cheap mail order firm. And I got 9 different colors, none of them named, and then 1 free peace rose as well. So that was my first rose garden.
Awesome. What were some of those first lessons that you learned just about rose care and rose growing that kind of stuck with you?
That growing in the Texas Panhandle is not the best place to grow roses.
Is it what's the climate like there compared to out here in California?
A little different. It's still the high plains, so we have blizzards and we have wind and we have tornadoes and cold, and it's a hard place to grow any plant. So it's amazing I fell in love with plants in a place that had a very limited plant palette.
Probably a good experience, because if you can grow there in those extreme weather conditions, you could probably grow anywhere.
At least a little bit.
How does rose breeding even work? First, I'm a normie, and so a lot of our listeners probably are similar. We're not rose breeders like you. We don't have that experience and that pedigree.
Right.
But could you give us like the rundown? Like, what are the basics of rose breeding? Does it take a laboratory, or can anybody do it in their backyard?
It's really one of the most primitive of plant breeding forms, and there is a whole group of hybridizers who are amateurs. They have an amateur rose hybridizers association, in fact. So it can be done in the backyard. It's nice to have controlled conditions like a greenhouse to do it in, because that way you can prevent cross-pollinations with the insects working with you. So the rose has both sexes, both male and female, and you want to control the cross, which means you're going to have to break open the flower when it's young and remove the male portion, and then pollinate the female the following day with the desired father that you want. And ideally, you should have a goal. You want to achieve a certain goal, and you choose parents that you hope will get you there. But it's basically the luck of the draw and the wealth of the eye. At Weeks Roses, we would do over 40,000 hand pollinations in one single season.
That's incredible.
And harvest about 250,000 seed. And those would represent about 1,000 to 1,100 different crosses that we have made. About 40% of those will germinate, and you can begin culling them out right away. Either they're disease prone or they're ugly. And you can cull it down to get the best varieties. And that's part of the 10-year process. It's a 10-year process to bring a variety forward from the point of pollinating to the point of introduction. Part of that is the seed in a rose are like kids in a family. They have the same parents, but each one is a unique individual that you are not going to replicate if you make that cross again. So once you have your unique individual that you like, part of the 10-year process is going from one plant to several thousand of that same plant by asexual propagation. And part of the 10-year process is testing and evaluating the performance of these varieties in other climates. I mean, something that looks great in California can look awful in New York. They can change colors. It can be a dramatic change. People don't realize how much roses can change depending on where they're being grown.
Is that temperature, humidity that's causing that? Like, what are the factors that are really...
All sorts of things: temperature, humidity, elevation, genetics. I wish I had figured that out in my career. I never could.
That's so cool. Now, a lot of that, what comes out after you do the breeding, are they happy accidents that you can then utilize for success, or is it all deliberate decisions that where you're going a direction and you kind of know where you're headed?
It's probably more in the happy accident area. I have, however, achieved the goals that I set forward in a specific breeding. One of my best varieties is Julia Child.
Oh
And
yeah.
my goal for that cross was a bright yellow climber. And all of Julia's sisters were predominantly climbers, except here was this nice little round ball that was a pure accident, and but it had good bloodlines. So you're not going to turn it down just because it doesn't meet your goal. You're going to use what you have in front of you, what you're observing, and make the best of it.
And that's a beautiful rose, by the way. Gosh, that was a kind of a golden yellow blossom on
Yes.
there. And it's just so rich. It tends to stand out amongst all the other ones. It really pops.
And see, Julia actually chose the variety, but we had approached Julia a few times to name a rose for her, and she always said, "Oh, I'm not worthy." But she had a friend in Santa Barbara because she lived between Boston and Santa Barbara. She had a friend in Santa Barbara who was in the food industry, and their daughter ran a unusual rose operation where she was growing outdoor roses outdoors, but cutting the flowers and selling them to the local market, which was quite unusual at the time. And her name was Donnie, and I would send Donnie new varieties like 1 or 2 years before they came forward just to see how they worked with her operation. Well, her parents invited Julia over for dinner one night, and I had sent her this unnamed rose, and it was flowering in the garden. So Julia Child went out with her cocktail, no doubt, and wandered through the rose garden. And she commented, "Oh, if there ever were to be a rose named for me, I would like that one." So Donnie called me the next morning, and we started the ball rolling. And I think if Julia had not been alive and stepped on the toes of the lawyers, they never would have allowed it because her name has not been allowed for usage on anything else at all. And she chose very well. She chose the best rose of my career
Oh
because
wow. Oh, that's the one that you hang your hat on.
yeah, it looks the same everywhere it goes. And that is very, very unusual. So it's been introduced in England, in Europe, in South Africa, in Japan, Australia, throughout the world, but it carries different names. And this is not an uncommon thing. Julia Child was perceived to be purely American in its marketing abilities. So in England, where it won an award, the top award, it's called Absolutely Fabulous, and it's the same rose. I mean, I'm happy to have the Ab Fab rose in my career.
Ab Fab, I like
Ab
it.
Fab, yeah. In Australia, it's called Soulmate. In Czechoslovakia, it's named after a Czech actress. In South Africa, it's named for a petroleum company, which sounds crazy, but they have it planted at every gas station. And I'm not going to attempt the Japanese name at all.
So is how important is it if you want to plant and grow roses or a rose, how important is it to find the right rose for our location?
Well, I think if you want to find success, it's important. And a great thing to do is to utilize your local public rose garden if you've got one. Go there and see what's performing well in your climate. And also, the American Rose Society offers a unique service. They have a group of what they call consulting rosarians. So these are knowledgeable rosarians all throughout the United States, and they go through a certification program. And you can contact the American Rose Society, let's say if you don't have a public rose garden, and ask them to connect you to a consulting rosarian that is closest to your location. And that person can give you direct advice on what's great for your soil, what's great for your climate, your watering needs, all kinds of questions. And that's an absolutely free service.
That is pretty cool because I've even noticed in my own garden that I have 9 roses and they all perform a little differently in the way they grow, the way they look,
Yeah.
even though they're getting exactly the same care. So it's kind of interesting to see the different characteristics there. When I was planting it, I actually reached out to some master rosarians, a shared friend of ours, Linda Knowles,
Mm-hmm.
one of our local master rosarians, and she's so delightful and knowledgeable. And she gave me a list of, I asked her, hey, what are some good roses that I should consider? I got a spot for 9 roses. And I'm looking at this list of some of the roses that you had produced in your career. And I was thinking about half or close to half of mine are all yours. Like the Ebb Tide, the Strike It Rich, the Neil Diamond, and a few others, just to
Right.
name. And they're beautiful. So thank you so much, just for my own sake. And they were great. They were great selections to choose because they're all different colors. They all kind of have different characteristics. for you, other than the one, the Julia Child, what was a rose that maybe came before your time that somebody else either bred or was already in existence that really caught your eye? What was some of your favorite early roses?
Oh, it goes across the board. I would have to say Brandy from the remarkable Herb Swim. I will always have Brandy in my garden. Uh, Playboy from Cocker in Scotland. Now, Playboy is a brilliant colors. It's a single petal, but I like singles, even though the public don't buy them. And it's got beautiful foliage to flower contrast. So that's one that will always be in my home garden as well. And then going back to Fragrant Cloud in the 1960s, it's still a favorite fragrance and a beautiful performer. And that was from the breeding firm Tantau in Germany, and one of their most successful roses. So those are a few.
When it comes to like the practices of people growing at home and the way we care for our roses, has anything changed in that, or has it the best practices back then are still good now?
Well, there's always new modifications and things to to center yourself on. Other than, I'll give you an example. My old boss at Jackson and Perkins, it was Bill Warner, and I was brand new in the business at that point. And I said, Bill, we should be breeding for disease resistance. And his reply to me was, well, all you got to do is spray them. And
Chemical solution.
yeah, we're not of that mindset anymore. People are lazy gardeners pretty much these days. And the more simple we can make it, the better.
Yeah, it's more accessible.
Yeah, it's more accessible. As you know, now my role is as the curator of the rose collection here at the Huntington.
Oh yeah.
And that's really one of my goals with that garden, is to say we are a no spray garden, and things happen, and we let them happen, and we let that cycle go through the garden. And my hope is, if you look at a bush and it's got all of its foliage and it's absolutely clean, and you look at the bush next to it and it's defoliated from black spot, which one are you going to buy? Which one are you going to plant in your home garden?
That resilient one.
Yeah. You see a lot of books on roses, mostly written by exhibitors. And it's the best in show mentality. More fertilizer, more fertilizer, more spray, more spray. And it's like, we got to make this simple if we're going to get people to grow roses. They're not going to be doing this sort of regime. They're busy people. They're running an expensive household with kids. They don't have time for this. So we got to make it simple. We got to make it easy.
Well, okay, so after a 40-year career, or over 40 years, you've been credited with bringing more than 100 roses to market, including 11 All-America rose selections. Pretty incredible. I mean, I'd clap for you if it was acceptable on a podcast. Really incredible. That's such a body of work. And now you've kind of hit retirement, but you're retired from rose breeding, but then you're back into it. So tell us a little bit. You're at the you work as the position as the E.L. and Ruth B. Shannon curator of the rose collections at the Huntington Library in San Marino. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's the Huntington Library, Art Museum, and Botanical Gardens.
It's a 3-acre rose garden, and it was started out the early 1900s and has more than 4,000 individual rose bushes.
Actually, we're at 2,500. Different counts get run around, but we're at 2,500. We have over 1,300 varieties.
Wow.
In our collection.
What is next for that garden? What are your goals, and what do you hope to achieve with your work there?
Right now, we're just enriching the collection itself by bringing more varieties on. We really want to show the history of the rose. I have a group of trained docents who man an information table when we have visitors, who are there to answer not only where the bathroom is, but also talk to people about how roses came from China originally and the history of those roses, and show them examples of those roses in the garden, to talk about the mid-century hybrids that were initially bred for the florist production and leaked their way over into the garden production, because florist production was where you can make a lot of money fast. Garden production, not so much so. And to just watch people come into the garden, especially in spring bloom when it's pretty damn spectacular, and just be in awe. I've actually seen people come into the garden and begin to weep because of its beauty. So it's a very rewarding position to be in my retirement years, and I feel very fortunate to have that chance.
Yeah, it's a pretty perfect situation just for my just looking out from the outside in. It's for
Yeah.
you and your background, and it just seems like a perfect fit. And they're so lucky to have you, I'm sure.
Well, I have a great team, and that makes a big difference. A lot of great supporters. Volunteer wise, we depend on our volunteer force a lot. I have 45 volunteers just in the Rose Garden.
Whoa, that's like a platoon
So
and a half of
with
Rose.
the education department, with the art department, with the library, with the botanical, there's over 1,200 volunteers at the Huntington.
How does it feel to like work with people who are willing to work for free just because they're fired up about roses?
Oh, it's great. It's great. And we try to make it a learning experience for them. So, for instance, if something unusual like the orange flowered osmanthus is in full flower, I'll tell them put down your shears. We're going on a field trip, and we'll walk over to see that and smell that and experience it. So we try to make it, a learning experience as well as an experience of a social experience. I mean, a lot of these people have formed social networks. They travel together. They go out to lunch together. They love the Rose Garden. They're very supportive. So you meet some amazing people.
I bet. I love that. I'm ready to kind of quit everything. I want to come down there and be be your protege. That just sounds like so much fun. I love the idea of just working and then be like, hey, let's take a break and let's go share something. Let's go look at something together,
Yeah,
smell
yeah,
something, touch it, talk
yeah.
about it. You mentioned people come in the garden and sometimes they're just so beautiful and they get overwhelmed and maybe brings a tear to their eye. I know for me, gardening and growing, it has a lot of connection to my family and to memories and things. Are there any memories or folks in your life when you got out into the rose garden where that you kind of get the feels a little bit?
Oh yeah, yeah. And the Huntington is full of memories for people. For me, I brought my grandmother out here uh, probably in the early '80s with my parents, and she was a gardener. And you know that we all come to gardening probably because of memories of our parents or our grandparents or our good buddy that was a gardener. And this grandmother was my gardener inspiration. And we got her into the desert garden. And she said, "Oh, I'm going to sit for a while. You guys go back." And then we came back and found her, and she had taken little snippets, cuttings, and stuffed them in their
She's
pockets.
prop lifting.
Yes, of course. Now that no by any means, but that will always bring her to mind
Yeah.
when I think of the Huntington. But I've seen people walk into the garden. There was one lady whose mom had just passed away, and she came back to the garden for the first time, the rose garden. And she walked into the garden and says, "I remember this. I remember this." So memories are a big factor, and memories are a big factor of learning to garden. That's one reason I really try to interact with the young kids that are coming into the garden to say, "Hey, smell this," or "Look at this." And we have a little children's destination area. Our faux bois artist who restored our fake wood arbor put an owl in one of the trunks, and he also put a fairy door down at the base of one of the trucks. So that's there for the kids to find. And sometimes we'll come in from weekend, and the fairy door will be all festooned with spent camellia petals or spent rose petals or leaves. And we've actually had letters written to the fairy and poems. And so that kind of memory is something that'll stick with these kids, and hopefully they'll garden.
I 1000% agree. That's awesome. It's like if you bring them in there, like the garden becomes a magical place to them, and
Yeah,
and it certainly is to me. My rose garden was for my mom, and I
yeah.
planted them last February. When I got those first blooms in spring, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't go out there and get a tear kind of welling up
Hmm.
in my eye, just thinking about my mom and that. It's
Yeah,
pretty wild to think about the way that we connect with the plants. It can be economic, it can be spiritual, religious, it can be emotional,
yeah.
it can just be joyful. It's pretty incredible. Now I'm curious, Tom. from all of your years of growing roses, if somebody was to start a rose garden right now from scratch and they had zero experience growing, what would be just your what would be your recommendations for them to be successful with those roses?
Make sure you have adequate light. Number one, roses love sun. Make sure you have adequate air circulation because that's important to keep diseases down. It's nice to have a well-drained soil and an irrigation system that will provide them with adequate water. But then as far as varieties go, I try to get them to focus a little bit more. Like, what color do you like? What attributes are you looking for? Do you want something that's fragrant? Do you want something that would cut and last a long time in the vase? And try and define it down to give them more specific recommendations that they'll be successful with.
That sounds good. Like good advice to me. It's one of those things where roses just they want to grow. They really
Yes.
do. And if it's a healthy rose, and usually if you're getting it from a nursery, it came from a breeder like yourself who spent 10 or more years breeding it to its, final form. Most of them they want to grow and be healthy. It's like I've had success just same good soil, lots of sunlight, a little bit of space, adequate watering, keep the weeds off them,
Yeah.
and you kind of go from there. And it seems to for me it's one of the easier plants that I do grow.
They're really tough plants. And unfortunately, they've gotten the rap as being fussy.
Yeah,
You
I
have to
agree.
fuss with them. And that's not the case at all. They are darn tough. And they're not that bad at all. But I can tell you the number one question we get is, besides where the fragrant rose is what rose grows in the shade? And the answer is none. None. A camellia will grow in the shade. Plant a camellia. But a rose, no. It will live, but it won't thrive. So consider something else for the shade, not roses.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I've got blue eyes. My wife's got brown. All of our kids have brown eyes.
Yeah,
But I love it. I love them. That's awesome. Well, I mean, all the names on these are really wild. Some are named after people. Some have
yeah.
interesting, stainless steel and
Hmm.
sentimental. What is the process? Do you just kind of throw a dart at a board and with names
No,
on it, or like,
oh no.
what do you do?
Name is very important, very important. So, in fact, a great name can carry a mediocre rose, and a bad name can kill a good rose. So, it's an extremely important part of marketing of the new variety. After all, you've given it 8 years. You don't want to blow that with a bad name. So it's really it's a painful process, I can tell you. You do have to go through the International Registrar of Naming, which is no big deal, but you got to make sure it's not copyrighted or trademarked. You want to choose a name that somehow brings that rose to mind. You want to choose a name that people will remember when they get to the nursery to buy it. If it's a person's name, it needs to have that person's permission to use the name. So it's pretty tricky. I have ended up, not by choice, but with quite a few celebrity names amongst my roses. Barbara Streisand, who took 3 years to select a rose for herself and was a great promoter of it. And she loves roses. But I
Good to
also have
know.
Phyllis Diller and Neil Diamond and others. And I didn't set about to say, oh, I want a bunch of celebrity roses, but it just sort of happened.
Yeah, so why is there not a Tom Carruth rose? We got to not one you bred, but I want one with your name stamped on it so I can grow it in my garden.
Well, we like to sell roses, Kevin. So I'm okay without that.
You know what? Tom Carruth, that kind of sounds exactly like a name of a rose breeder. I think you were bred for this. It's pretty cool. I'm sure you'll get it in no time. I'm ready for the Kevin Jordan rose, but it's like I'm like probably
again,
very
we like to
undeserving.
sell roses, Kevin.
Everyone be like, who? Who the heck is that? No, that's awesome. It's kind of cool that they have such wild, interesting names. For me, it's kind of the fun of it. It's go
Yeah,
out there and find these interesting ones, and then when someone recommends you one, it's interesting to go kind of check it out and see it for yourself.
you are always learning. You never know it all. And that's the great joy of plants. It may be a new plant, it may be a new culture, it may be a new fertilizer, or unfortunately, a new insect. but you're always learning. If you think you know it all, you better get ready. Mother Nature's about to teach you a lesson.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's always something new to learn. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Carruth, gosh, I tip my straw hat to you. Incredible person, incredible career. I was so thankful
Oh,
that we
thank
got
you,
to meet in
Kevin.
person. And if
Thanks.
you ever make your way back up here again, let us know.
Oh,
Love to
well.
spend some time with you and pick that big old brain of yours a little bit more.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, we are back. Big thank you to Mr. Tom Carruth. That was so cool to hear and learn from you. I was in awe the whole time. I am over here just excited about things he was talking about, like breeding. I'm really interested in, Kevin. Like, he was talking about, at first he's cross-pollinating, and then he starts doing like an asexual reproduction, like where he's duplicating the same thing.
With the grafting, yeah.
What's going on there, Kevin?
So I actually brought in a flower.
Oh.
I ripped off, it's pretty mature. I ripped off all the petals, and this one's extra mature. You can see it's almost even developing, maybe even has developed the seeds in there. But on the outside, you can see like a crown of kind of yellow little sticks. Like that's the stain. Those are the stamen.
Oh,
and
these
so those
right here
are the male organs that creates the pollen. An anther sits
Can I
above the
touch it?
filament. Yeah, oh yeah. The anthers sit above the filament. And then the pistil or carpel is the female organ, and that's going to have a stigma, a style that contains the ovaries, and there's ovules within the ovary. If the pollen makes it down the stigma and the style all the way to the ovaries and gets those ovules pollinated, boom, you've got new seeds. It's pretty cool. I was really inspired after talking with Tom. It's really cool to learn kind of new things, get that insider knowledge. But really just to kind of hear the stories that he had about the people in his life and his memories and connection to the flowers that he's made and the impact that those roses have had on other people and where they grow them. And it's pretty incredible to think about the impact and the beauty that he has created over the years. Like he mentioned, he found this love at a young age. Not all of us do. Some people get into gardening quite a bit later, and that's cool too. But to think he's just been at it for so long. And now he's got this third act over there at that botanical garden. Oh my God, Austin, we gotta
go for sure.
What an incredible placement for him. I'm sure they're so lucky to have him, but we got to get out there. And this is an incredible person. I highly urge our listeners, look up Tom Carruth. This is actually a proper person that you can Google. You can learn about his history, what he's done. And if you go into a nursery with a decent rose selection, Green Acres Nursery, not to mention, but go out to your local nurseries, whatever they may be, and check out the roses, because you might be surprised to know that many of which were bred by a person like Tom or Tom himself. So it's pretty wild to think there's people out there whose work is just to make the world more beautiful, more bountiful, more economically viable for people that make a business in like floriculture. Like he talked about, a lot of his roses. People are probably buying in bouquets that
cool.
I've been, they're in the greenhouse. They're growing for, the flower industry, and
they're
then
beautiful.
Some of which come into our gardens.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool all the way around. Dude, we love you, Tom. Man, what else can we say? He's like an instant hit for us. It's so cool.
Oh, what a good time. All right. Well, I'm fired up on this, and I think, yes, let's sit down and figure out how we can get down there. But for now, let's go ahead and head out. Big thank you to Tom. Kevin, go ahead and take us out.
What a great episode, an amazing guest. Thanks again to Tom Carruth, and to all you listeners out there for making time to sit down with us and bring us into your lives. Maybe you're gardening a little bit or having your, a nice little tea. But thank you so much for each and every click and view and download. We really love having you. Until next week, Gar friends, please get out there, think about planting some roses, and we will see you in the next one. Happy gardening to you all, and please never stop growing.